The preacher's coffin hadn't even cooled when the landlord came knocking. Edna May Tabor stood on the sagging porch of the weather-beaten farmhouse, her hands still dusted with flour, apron damp from sweat and tears. Behind her, the house smelled like chicken stew left too long on the stove. Before her stood Mr. Cranston, all boots, sweat, and cigar breath, holding a scrap of paper like it was a Bible verse sent straight from God. 2 weeks, Edna, he grunted. Ain't my fault your mama up and died, but I'm not running a charity. Either you pay, or I bring the men to haul you and that trunk of baked nonsense out of here. She didn't cry. Not in front of him. She just nodded once, stiff and slow, like a woman being sentenced. After he left, she closed the door and sat on the hardwood floor beside her mother's old baking tin, the one with the bent lid and a faded sticker of the Sacred Heart. Her chest felt like it was caving in. Her mama was gone. The rent was due. No family left, no prospects, and no place in a world that had never been kind to a big girl with quiet eyes and a baker's hands. Then she saw it. Tucked beneath a yellowing copy of the Arkansas Matrimonial Gazette, a sealed envelope. No return address, just her name, Miss Edna May Tabor, Yell County. The handwriting was careful, slanted like someone who hadn't written in English for long. The ink was old, maybe weeks. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside, a folded letter, a single train ticket to Florence, Montana, and a silver band tied with red string. The letter read, "If you're still reading, I reckon you've got more courage than most men I know. My name is Isaac Two Rivers. I don't write well, but I live honest. I trap, I trade, and I build with my hands. My cabin sits high in the Bitterroot Mountains where the snow falls deep and the air stays quiet. I don't offer wealth, just peace. If you come, I'll meet you at the Florence Depot. If not, I wish you warmth wherever you land." She read the letter 5 times. It didn't promise love. It didn't ask for beauty. It offered no lies. It was in its strange way the most respectful thing a man had ever said to her. That night, Edna packed what little she had. Her mother's cast iron skillet, her father's dog-eared Bible, 2 dresses, 1 worn hat, and a biscuit tin full of dried apples. She slipped the ring onto her finger, not to accept, but to remember she had been seen. Not judged, not mocked, seen. The journey from Arkansas to Montana took 6 days by train, each mile dragging her farther from the red clay roads of home and deeper into wild country. At first, passengers tried to make small talk. She didn't answer. They gave up. She spent the long hours staring out the window at landscapes that shifted like moods, sun-bleached plains, lightning-torn skies, endless ridges of pine. In her lap, the letter stayed folded like a secret, the silver ring resting cold against her skin. Each night, she lay in the sleeping car, heart thrumming like distant thunder. What if he was cruel? What if he didn't show? What if she was trading one kind of emptiness for another? But the image of that single sentence kept pulling her forward. If you're still reading. It didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a test. One she had to pass. By the time the train slowed at Florence, Montana, her mouth was dry and her stomach felt hollow. The Bitterroot Valley lay stretched before her, vast and wild snow-capped peaks in the distance, log cabins scattered like broken teeth, and the sky the sky was bigger than anything she'd ever seen. She stepped down from the train platform in her worn boots and Sunday dress, holding her mother's baking tin tight against her chest. The wind carried the sharp scent of pine ash and something colder mountain air that cut deeper than memory. There was no man waiting for her, just a one-armed blacksmith sitting beside a mule wagon smoking a pipe like he had all the time in the world. You Edna May Tabor, he asked without getting up. She nodded. He tipped his hat with the stump of his missing hand. Name's Hawk McKinney. Isaac sent me. Says to bring you up the ridge. Edna swallowed hard. Why didn't he come himself? Hawk exhaled smoke slowly. He ain't one for crowds. And truth be told, Florence ain't one for him neither. That was the first time her gut turned. The wagon ride was steep and silent. Hawk said little, but when he did, it came like gravel across dry earth. Isaac's a good man, he finally said. Too honest for his own good. Ain't soft, though. This mountain's chewed up better folks than me. What's he look like? Edna asked, unsure why it mattered. Hawk chuckled. Not like the photo. The sun dipped low as they climbed the mountain path. The trail narrowed, flanked by tall pines and rock faces dusted with snow. Somewhere a wolf howled long, mournful, familiar. Edna shivered. As they crested the ridge, she saw at a narrow clearing smoke curling from a crooked chimney. A cabin, sturdy and low, nestled into the edge of the world. And in front of it, a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair pulled back with rawhide. A thick coat of fur draped over his frame. His eyes were dark and unreadable. A scar split his left cheek like lightning over stone. That was not the man from the photo. Hawk didn't say a word. He climbed down and tossed Edna her bag. The man stepped forward. His voice was low and rough like a stream under thawing ice. You're Edna May. She nodded. I'm Isaac Two Rivers. She stared at him, heart racing. You sent me a letter. He hesitated. Then quietly, no. I didn't. That ain't the man in the photo, miss. But that's the man who sent for you. The words hung in the air like pine smoke. Edna May stood stiff-legged beside the mule wagon, her fingers still clenched around the handle of her baking tin. The cold crept through her shoes, nipping at her toes. The man Isaac watched her, unmoving, the wolf dog at his side, silent as a shadow. That photo. She started, voice cracking from the wind or nerves or both. I don't know who sent it, Isaac said. But it wasn't me. He didn't sound angry, just matter of fact, like weather or death. Hawk McKinney rubbed his jaw, eyes narrowing, as if the words carried more weight than he liked. Letter too, Edna asked. You didn't write it, Isaac's gaze flicked toward Hawk, then back to her. I know the letter. I told her the words, but I didn't put pen to paper, her Edna asked. A long silence. Sister Madeline Hawk said finally. Old Nun lives down near Florence, runs a little school out of the old mission ruins. She taught Isaac his letters when he was a boy. Isaac nodded once. She said the treaty would break if I stayed alone. Said settlers don't trust a man like me unless there's a white woman at his side. Edna felt her knees weaken, but she didn't sit. She wouldn't, not yet. So you sent for me to, what, be your shield? Her voice had an edge now. Your disguise, no. Isaac's jaw flexed. I sent for peace. You were part of the price. The wolf dog growled low, sensing tension. Isaac murmured something in Salish, and the animal slunk behind him. Edna swallowed hard. And if I say no, Isaac stepped forward slowly, hands visible, careful. Then you go. Hawk'll take you back to Florence. No harm. She didn't move, didn't speak, not yet. The sun dipped behind the pines, throwing long shadows across the snow. The air was thin up here, she could feel it pressing against her ribs. Her chest ached, her brain buzzed with fear, confusion, shame. She'd ridden 6 days across the country, Worn the ring imagined a life with a kind man whose words had wrapped around her like a quilt. And now, this. Isaac looked at her, not just glanced, but looked. His eyes were like stone but not cold, just old, like someone who'd been carrying silence longer than most folks had been alive. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wrapped bundle. "This is for you," he said, laying it gently on the porch rail. "A wedding gift. Don't open it yet." "Why?" "Because you don't know what you want yet. You will." And with that, he turned and walked inside the cabin. No arguments, no pressure, just left her there, chilled, confused, and furious. Hawk sighed, hopping down from the wagon with surprising grace for a man with one good arm. "Don't take it personal," he muttered. "He ain't mean. Just carved from rough stone, that one." Edna turned to him. "You knew I suspected, and you still brought me up here." Hawk met her glare. "I brought you where you said to go. You wanted to meet the man behind the letter. Now you have." She looked back at the cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Somewhere inside, a fire crackled, and that stupid box still sat on the porch untouched. She walked to it, unwrapped the hide covering. A box cedarwood, smooth and warm despite the cold. The lid was etched with a symbol she didn't recognize, two rivers crossing beneath a mountain. No key, no lock. Just a line burned into the edge when your heart knows. She didn't open it, didn't throw it either. Instead, she sat on the steps, set her tin beside her, and pulled her coat tighter. The sun vanished. Stars pricked the sky one by one, shy and sharp. She was still sitting there when the door creaked open. "You'll freeze," Isaac said quietly. She didn't turn. "I've slept in worse." He was silent for a long moment. Then softly he said, "There's a cot, and food if you want it." "Do I get my own room?" "No rooms, just walls." That made her laugh, sharp and bitter, but she stood, took the box, and stepped inside. The cabin smelled like pine sap and bear grease. Antlers hung above the hearth. Furs lined the floors. One small table, two wooden chairs, a cast iron stove, a shelf of books, a rifle mounted above the door. Isaac didn't look at her. He ladled something from a pot into a tin bowl and set it on the table. Stew. She sat and ate. It wasn't bad. They didn't talk. But the silence wasn't cruel. It was just quiet. He laid out a cot near the fire, rolled her a thick blanket, then without another word, took his own bedroll to the far corner and turned away. She lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't what she expected. It wasn't romance, but it wasn't cruelty either. Just something old, something unfinished, like a letter never mailed. Morning came with frost on the windows. She woke to the smell of coffee and firewood. Isaac wasn't inside. She dressed, stepped outside. Snow dusted the ground, pale and soft. The wolf dog lay near the woodpile, eyeing her with lazy suspicion. In the distance, she saw him, Isaac, splitting wood sleeves, rolled steam rising from his shoulders in the cold. She watched him work, efficient, quiet, alone. Then she heard Hawk behind her tightening the wagon ropes. "He'll never ask you to stay," he said. "But if you do, he won't forget it." She turned. "Why tell me that? Because you deserve to know the kind of man he is." She looked down at the box in her hands, still unopened, but heavier now. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. That night she lay awake on the cot, the fire crackling low, the box beside her. She whispered into the dark. What did I just walk into? The wind didn't answer. But it carried something on it, smoke, yes, but also a warning. A storm was coming. You were never mine to keep. But the peace was. Isaac spoke the words without looking at her, his hands busy carving something into a long strip of antler near the fire. The room was warm, but Edna May felt a cold tighten in her chest. She'd asked the question without much ceremony just after the morning coffee had cooled. So just tell me straight. Was this all arranged like some treaty signing? Isaac didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared into the fire like he expected it to say something wiser than he could. Now she had her answer. And it wasn't the one she wanted. I didn't lie, he said at last, laying the carving down. But I didn't tell you everything either. Edna stood with her back to the table, arms crossed. The box sat unopened beside her, its polished wood catching the firelight. You let me believe, she said, voice low. You let me believe it was real. Isaac turned toward her, not angry, not defensive, just still. It is real, but not the way you thought. Edna blinked, trying to hold the heat behind her eyes. I wore the ring. I showed that letter to the ticket man in Little Rock like it was gold. I left everything. For what? His answer was a whisper. For peace. The room fell silent, save for the soft groan of the firewood and the wind pressing gently against the window pane. Isaac gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. I'll tell you everything. Edna didn't want to, but she did. He leaned forward and elbows on his knees, voice calm like he was reciting something from memory. There's a boundary up here, he said. Not the kind you mark with fences. It runs between blood and dirt, between who belongs and who never will. I walk both sides. That makes folks nervous. He ran a hand down his face. Some Salish see me as too white. Some settlers see me as too red. So when land gets contested, when game disappears or a cow turns up dead, they look for someone to blame. Someone like you, Edna said. He nodded. Last winter, 3 ranchers came up here looking for a fight. Said I'd been hiding their stolen cattle in the canyon. I hadn't. But facts don't matter when folks are scared. Sister Madeline stopped them. Told them I was planning to marry. Said it would calm things down. You weren't. Edna said. No, he admitted. But she wasn't wrong. Peace is easier to sell when it comes dressed like a wedding. And I'm the dress, Edna muttered. Isaac shook his head. You're not a disguise. You're a chance, oh? You didn't have to answer that letter. I didn't know it came with terms. He looked at her then. His eyes were tired not with age but with use. I don't want your pity, or your charity. I won't bind you. I won't lie to you. Edna stared at the flames. What if I want to leave? She asked. I'll take you to Florence myself. You can stay with Sister Madeline until spring. She'll help you find a way home. And the treaty, Isaac's jaw tightened. It'll break, eventually, with or without you. But maybe, with you here, we hold it off longer. Maybe long enough for some other way to root. She didn't speak. He leaned back, rubbing the scar along his cheek. You were never mine to keep. But the peace was. And somehow that hurt more than any lie might have. That afternoon, Edna took a walk around the cabin past the smokehouse and the stacked cords of split wood. The air was crisp, the sky a pale blue washed thin by winter. A creek ran nearby, still trickling despite the frost. She needed to think. There was no romance here, no promises, just survival. And something else she hadn't named yet, honor maybe. Duty. But not the kind she was used to hearing about in church sermons or town gossip. Isaac hadn't pretended. He hadn't wooed her. But he hadn't chained her either. In that space between truth and silence, she saw something she didn't expect: respect. And a strange flicker of dignity, too, growing like fire under wet wood. Slow, stubborn, but real. By evening, she was back inside the box, still untouched on the table. Isaac was tending the stew again. His movements were simple, efficient. Nothing wasted. He didn't ask where she'd been. Didn't press. When she sat down, he slid her a bowl without a word. They ate in silence, but it wasn't strained anymore. Just quiet. Afterward, he reached into the corner of the room and pulled out a woven blanket, black with red and white shapes, hand-stitched, worn but clean. He placed it across her lap without explanation. "It's colder tonight," he said. She traced the patterns with her fingers. "Did your mother make this?" Isaac shook his head. "My aunt. Before she passed. It's beautiful." She said every stitch was a prayer. Edna looked up. "And what do they pray for out here?" Isaac met her eyes. "For things to last." Later, lying on the cot, Edna couldn't sleep. The blanket was warm. The fire crackled soft. She turned toward the box on the stool beside her. It glowed dully in the firelight. She placed a hand on it. Didn't open it. Just let her fingers rest on the wood. She thought of that letter, of the phrase that had first held her. "If you're still reading, I reckon you've got more courage than most men I know." She had read it. She had come. And now she was here. In a place between leaving and staying, between obligation and something deeper. Not quite trust, but not far from it. At dawn, she stepped outside to fetch water. The frost bit her cheeks, but the sky was stunning soft gold behind the ridgeline's trees, shimmering with light. Isaac was already at the edge of the tree line, chopping wood. She called to him, surprising herself. "Would it help if I stayed?" He paused, turned, then nodded once. "Maybe. Maybe not." She smiled faintly. "That's honest." He rested the axe on his shoulder. "It's all I got." Behind her, smoke rose from the chimney. The box still waited on the table. She hadn't said yes, not yet, but she didn't ask to leave. And that was enough for now. It's the quiet that gets you first, like the lands daring you to speak. Edna May muttered the words under her breath as she stirred the stew pot for the second time that morning. They'd slipped out of her like breath, not really meant for anyone, just a way to fill the long, low silence of the cabin. Isaac had already gone, no note, no word, no mention of where he was headed or when he'd be back. Just the faint trail of boot prints in the snow outside and the smell of pine sap clinging to the doorframe. That had been hours ago. The wood stove hissed and cracked beside her, but the sound barely registered. The silence out here wasn't like the quiet back home in Arkansas. That quiet came from folks not talking because they didn't care what you had to say. This was different. This quiet had weight. It pressed on you. It watched you. She set down the spoon and walked to the window. The land stretched out, white and blue, broken only by the dark lines of trees and the far-off rise of the bitter roots. She could see no one, hear nothing but the occasional snap of ice falling from the eaves. She exhaled, then laughed to herself, quiet and bitter. "This is what I wanted, isn't it?" she whispered. "A man, a home, a new beginning." But it hadn't come with laughter or music or even a God-forsaken "How was your sleep?" It had come with snow and silence, and a man who could stand 5 feet from her and still feel like a stranger across an ocean. She pushed open the cabin door, pulling on her shawl and gloves, and stepped outside. The air bit sharp, but she welcomed the sting. Better cold than numb. The path behind the cabin curved around a stack of split logs and wound down toward the creek she'd seen days earlier. She needed something to do, something other than wait. She followed the trail with slow steps, eyes alert. The land was beautiful in a brutal sort of way. Towering evergreens, patches of hoarfrost clinging to the trunks, the occasional rustle of birds or squirrels darting underbrush. When she reached the creek, she crouched and dipped a tin bucket into the ice-cold water. It shocked her fingers, but she didn't flinch. She was tougher than people thought. She always had been. As she stood, she heard it a rustle, then stillness, then the unmistakable sound of movement. Slow, careful, heavy. Edna froze. She turned her head and saw it. A shape between the trees, low and coiled, a mountain lion. Its yellow eyes locked on her, muscles tight, tail twitching, silent and deadly. Her breath caught. She didn't run. She couldn't. If she bolted, it would leap. She looked around slowly. No Isaac. No rifle. Just her and a bucket of water and death watching her breathe. The mountain lion took a step forward. She raised the bucket like a shield, heart hammering. The snow crunched behind her. Then a low whistle. A flash of fur. The wolf dog burst from the trees with a snarl, placing itself between Edna and the cat. The lion hissed back to step, but didn't leave. Then came another sound, boots pounding. Isaac burst through the pines, rifle raised. One sharp shot cracked through the cold air. The lion darted away. Gone. Edna dropped the bucket. Water spilled and steamed where it touched the snow. Isaac rushed to her. "You hurt," she shook her head, still shaking. "No, no, God." He scanned her, then lowered the rifle, breathing heavy. "Don't come this far alone," he said, not angry but frustrated, like the fear in his throat hadn't faded yet. "I didn't mean to," she said, voice tight. I needed to move." He nodded once, then bent to pick up the spilled bucket. "Come on. Let's get back." They walked in silence. But this time it wasn't the kind that dared you. It was the kind that held you. That night, Edna sat by the fire, wrapped in the Salish blanket. Her hands had stopped shaking, but her mind hadn't. Isaac brought her a fresh mug of tea, some wild mint he brewed with pine needles, and a touch of honey. He didn't sit, just stood near the fire, watching the flames more than her. She stared at the box on the table, still unopened. "You were watching me," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "This morning. You knew I'd gone." Isaac nodded. "I saw your tracks, and the lion, I saw it too, was already tracking it. Knew it was circling close." Her lips pressed into a line. "Why didn't you stop me? I figured you needed space." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "That nearly got me killed." He didn't flinch. But it didn't. That sat between them. Then he added, quieter, "I don't own you, Edna. I won't shadow you like a jailer. But I'll be there if danger finds you. Always." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just said, "Thank you." He nodded slow and solemn, and she saw it then, the strain around his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders. He'd run to get to her, risked himself, not because he had to, because he chose to. Later she lay in bed staring at the roof beams, the box once again beside her. This time she picked it up, still didn't open it. But she held it differently, like it meant something more than she could name yet. She thought about the mountain lion, about Isaac's rifle shot, about the wolf dog standing between her and death like it was nothing. She'd never had anyone do that for her, never had someone watch her because she mattered. She pressed the box to her chest and closed her eyes. For the first time since arriving, sleep came gently. The next morning she woke before sunrise. The cabin was cold, dark. She stepped outside into the pale blue of pre-dawn. The world was quiet, but it didn't press on her now. It just waited. Isaac was already awake, boiling water by the fire pit outside. He nodded to her, then handed her a tin mug. She took it. Their fingers brushed. Something warm passed through her. Not love, not yet, but something. Later that day, Hawk McKinney arrived, stomping snow from his boots, his usual half-smile in place. "Brought you some dry flour and a story or two," he said. "Got time for both?" Edna smiled. "I think we do." He was raised by silence and shaped by ghosts. Hawk said it as he poured a splash of whiskey into his coffee, sitting in the only chair in the cabin that creaked louder than he did. The morning light broke gently through the window, casting stripes of gold across the wooden floor, and the fire crackled low beside him. Edna sat cross-legged near the stove, her skirt dusted with flour. She had just finished kneading dough, her fingers still coated in the memory of work. Isaac had gone out hunting at first light. He hadn't said where, only that he'd be back before sundown. Typical. But Hawk, he had time and stories and a way of talking that filled silence without making it heavier. She didn't ask him to start talking. He just did. "I reckon you've got questions," he said, eyes fixed on the fire. And Isaac sure as hell ain't the kind to hand out answers. Edna gave a small nod. "I don't know what I'm doing here, Hawk. I don't know what he expects. One minute I think he wants me gone. The next he's saving my life." Hawk grinned without teeth. "That's him, all right." He took a long sip, then set the mug on his knee. Isaac's mother was Salish. Her name was Tala. She was taken during a raid when she was a girl, barely 12. Ended up in a white homestead somewhere near Helena. Folks there didn't beat her, but they didn't let her speak her language either. Told her she'd burn in hell for talking to the trees. Edna swallowed hard. She'd known that kind of fire and brimstone talk well. Tala met a French trapper when she was 17, Hawk went on. He called himself Jules, smooth talker, wore buckskin like it was church linen. He stayed a few months, made promises. She believed him, gave him a son. Edna didn't have to ask who. When the baby came, Jules was long gone, just vanished. Left nothing but a blade and a name Isaac couldn't use. Hawk leaned forward. She raised him alone in a shack near the Blackfoot border. Taught him what she remembered. Songs, herbs, silence. Edna looked up. "Silence, yeah," Hawk said, his voice softening. Tala didn't believe in shouting. She said words should be earned. That the world would give you enough noise, what you needed was quiet to carry it. He took another sip. When Isaac was 9, some boys from town found him trapping rabbits. Called him half-blood. Spit on him. Broke his snare and tried to drown his catch in the creek. He didn't cry. Just watched. Did he fight back? Hawk nodded. Eventually. One of them lost 2 teeth. Isaac carried the others to town bruised and bloody and dropped them on the sheriff's porch like firewood. Didn't say a word. Edna's eyes widened. Sheriff asked him why. Isaac said, "They tried to kill what I caught. I stopped them." That was it. Hawk leaned back and let the story settle. He was raised by silence and shaped by ghosts. The mother who missed her home. The father who left no tracks. The tribe that called him a stranger. And the settlers that only saw what they feared. Edna hugged her knees. "No wonder he looks through me half the time." "He ain't looking through you, girl," Hawk said. "He's waiting to see if you'll leave like the rest." She let that sink in. All the strange distance, the short answers, the care taken without comment. It wasn't coldness. It was armor. And somehow she had been handed the key. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she whispered. Hawk's gaze sharpened. "You made it up this mountain. You cook so split kindling and face down cougars with a damn tin bucket. You're strong enough." Edna laughed a little breathless. "That cougar story's gonna follow me forever, huh?" "Sure as snow in February." Hawk grinned. She stood brushing flour off her skirt. "Why do you care, Hawk, about me about him?" He stood too, adjusting his coat. "Because peace ain't just some paper treaty. It's built person by person. And Isaac Two Rivers, he's the best chance we've got at something different. Something better." He paused at the door, one hand on the handle. "And because he added, turning back to her, I think you're more dangerous to him than any outlaw." Edna blinked. "Me? You're not scared of who he is." That kind of truth, it cuts deeper than a knife. Then he tipped his hat and stepped outside, leaving the door swinging gently behind him. That night, Isaac returned carrying 2 rabbits and a look that said he'd walked 20 miles through snow just to find something worth eating. Edna took them, cleaned them, seasoned them. They ate in silence, but it was warmer now, like something had cracked open in the room. When he finished, Isaac sat back and glanced toward the hearth. "Hawk, talk your ears off." She nodded. "He told me about your mother." Isaac didn't flinch. "He always does. He said you were raised in silence." He met her gaze. "And I think I'm learning to listen." Isaac blinked slowly. "Most folks talk over silence." "You sit in it. I was lonely a long time," she said. "Quiet's easier than begging to be heard." He looked down. "Then maybe you understand more than I thought." She let that hang for a moment, then reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a square of cloth, red and cream thread, hand-stitched with 2 rivers and a mountain. "I started embroidering something. Don't know why yet." He took it, fingers brushing hers, then held it like it was something precious. She stood brushing her hands on her skirt. "I think I'll walk down to the creek tomorrow," she said. His brows rose. "Alone?" She smiled. "Maybe. Maybe not." He gave the faintest nod. "The wolf dog will go with you." They locked eyes. Something unsaid passed between them. Not love. Not yet. But something building. The wind howled that night, but Edna slept deeper than she had since arriving. In her dreams, her mother's voice whispered soft from the baking tin. "Don't run, Edna girl. Just stand still long enough to be seen. You can't outrun the storm, but you can choose who you're stuck inside it with." By the time Edna realized how fast the sky was falling, it was too late to turn back. She'd left the cabin that morning with the wolf dog at her side, planning only a short walk to the ridge for firewood. The air had been crisp, the clouds thin and wispy, deceptive in their softness. But by midday, the wind came howling through the trees like a warning, and the snow followed fast behind. Thick, heavy flakes. Not the gentle kind. The kind that erased trails and swallowed sound. By the time she'd made it halfway back, the world had gone white. "Come on," she whispered to the wolf dog, who stayed close, his ears pinned. Almost there. But the trees looked different now. Familiar landmarks vanished behind curtains of snow. The trail she'd taken vanished beneath her boots. Her heart began to pound, not just from the cold, but from the creeping fear that she might have misjudged the land. Then she saw its smoke rising through the storm, faint but steady. The cabin. Relief poured through her limbs. She pushed toward it, wind cutting at her cheeks, breath short and ragged. By the time she pushed through the door, snow caked her coat, her hair soaked and her hands stinging. Isaac stood near the hearth, shirt sleeves rolled, a fresh stack of kindling in his arms. His eyes snapped to her. "Where the hell were you?" "I went for wood, didn't see the clouds until it was too late." He dropped the wood and crossed to her, pulling the wet coat from her shoulders. "You could have frozen out there." "I didn't," she said, teeth chattering. "I followed the smoke." He stared at her for a long second, then reached for a wool blanket. "Sit." She did, sinking near the fire as he wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and stoked the flames higher. The wolf dog settled beside her, curling close, his body heat welcome. Isaac said nothing for a long time, just poured her a mug of hot water with pine and honey and sat in the opposite chair. Outside, the storm howled like a wounded thing. Inside, it was just them and the fire. "You always get storms like this?" she asked, fingers wrapped around the warm mug. He nodded. "Late February through March. Worst time of the year. People disappear in this." She sipped the heat hitting her chest like medicine. "Guess we're stuck here a while." He leaned forward, arms resting on his knees. "You can't outrun the storm, but you can choose who you're stuck inside it with." She looked up at him, heart ticking harder. "That mean you're choosing me?" Isaac's eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "I wouldn't have written that letter if I didn't." She swallowed. "You didn't write it. Sister Madeline did." I gave her the words. They fell into silence again, but it was different now, not heavy, just full. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the box." Isaac's brow lifted. "You still haven't opened it?" "No." He waited. "Can I ask what's inside? You can. Will you tell me?" He shook his head slowly. "When you open it, it'll matter more if you don't know." She laughed softly. "That makes no sense." He leaned back, eyes on the fire. "Most things worth keeping don't." Another silence passed. The fire popped. The storm roared. "I'm not used to this kind of quiet," Edna said. Isaac looked at her. "I'm used to feeling small. Back home, quiet was something folks pushed on you. Like if you didn't speak fast enough, you'd disappear. You're not invisible here." "I was at first." His voice softened. "Not anymore." She looked down at the wolf dog's slow sleeping breath. "What changed?" "You stayed." They spent the rest of the day in the cabin. The wind screamed outside, but inside was steady. Edna stitched by the fire while Isaac mended a broken trap. Neither spoke much, but it didn't feel like absence. It felt like understanding. By nightfall, the snow had buried the porch and most of the path. Edna stirred the stew while Isaac chopped vegetables. At one point, their hands brushed. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. Later after supper, Isaac surprised her by pulling out a battered fiddle case from beneath his cot. "You play?" she asked, genuinely startled. He nodded, opening the case with care. The fiddle inside looked hand-carved, dark wood worn from years of use. "My mother taught me. Said the land would listen if you played honest." Edna leaned forward. "So what does it say when it listens?" He rosined the bow, tuned the strings. "It says it remembers." Then he played. A low, winding tune, not joyful, not sad, but something deeper, like roots finding water. It filled the room slowly, curling into corners, warming the walls. Edna listened, eyes damp. No one had ever played music for her. When he finished, the silence returned. But it was full of music now. "I think I'm starting to understand this place," she whispered. Isaac looked at her eyes, dark with something unsaid. "What do you understand?" She held his gaze. "That I belong." For the first time he smiled, not wide, not big, but real. "You do." That night the wind never stopped. But Edna slept well. And when she woke, the storm was still raging, but she didn't feel trapped. She felt claimed. Not by a man, but by the mountain. Sometimes it's the thing we don't say that cuts the deepest. The knock came just before dawn. 3 sharp raps on the door, fast and cold like the wind outside. Edna sat up on the cot, blinking against the low firelight, her breath visible in the chilled air. Isaac was already on his feet, his rifle halfway to his hand, before he even reached the door. When he cracked it open, a gust of snow blew in, and behind it a man wrapped in a heavy sheepskin coat, his hat dusted white, his boots caked thick with ice. "Name's Ezra Callahan," the man said before Isaac could ask. "Out of Florence. Rode through the night." Isaac stepped aside without a word. Ezra stomped the snow from his boots and peeled off his coat with stiff, frozen fingers. Edna had already stood and was stoking the fire higher, adding pine logs and pulling the kettle into place. "I bring news," Ezra said, looking between them. "And it ain't good." Isaac stayed quiet. But something about the way his shoulders tensed made Edna's stomach knot. Ezra's eyes found her. "You're the one who came on the train, right? The woman from Arkansas?" Edna nodded. "Yes." He offered a tight nod in return, then turned back to Isaac. "There was a fire in the valley, about 8 miles east of the mission. Barns were burned, 2 cows shot. One of the ranch hands swore he saw a man dressed in buckskin riding off. Said he was big, dark-haired, looked native." Isaac's face didn't change. "Did they name me? They didn't have to. Sheriff Carson is already talking like it's your fault." Edna stiffened. "That's ridiculous." Ezra shrugged. "Maybe. But truth don't matter much when men are scared. And out there, they're real scared." Isaac finally spoke. "Why ride all this way just to tell me because Sister Madeline asked me to? She said you'd need warning, that things are shifting." Edna looked between the 2 men, shifting how Ezra pulled a flask from his coat and took a long drink. "There's talk about settlers pushing further up the mountain come spring. Talk of cleaning house if need be. You being here alone, well, that just makes it easier for them to draw a line in the snow." Isaac didn't flinch. "They won't wait for spring." Ezra nodded grimly. "That's why I came now." The silence afterward was heavy. Edna sat back down slowly. "What do we do?" Isaac looked at her. Not past her, not through her, at her. "We hold the line," Ezra added. "It'll help if folks see you 2 together. Words gotten around about your marriage, real or not. It makes people hesitate. It wasn't real, Edna said softly. Not at first. Isaac's jaw twitched. Ezra nodded. Might be time to make it so. The room froze again, quiet but full. Isaac didn't look at her this time. He stared at the floor. I'll head back in a few hours, Ezra said. Wait for the storm to ease a little. You've got until then to decide. Then he stood and stepped outside, giving them space that neither of them asked for. Later, as snow fell soft against the window and the fire settled into its second breath, Edna sat across from Isaac. He hadn't said much. Neither had she. Because sometimes it's the thing we don't say that cuts the deepest. She stirred the tea in her mug slowly. You didn't deny it. Isaac looked up. Deny what? That marrying me would help. He nodded once. It would. And you didn't say you wanted to. I didn't think I needed to. That silenced her, but not in a cruel way, in a way that made her feel like she'd missed something soft and important. Why didn't you? She asked quieter now. He didn't answer right away. Then with a low voice that almost broke, because if I said it out loud, it'd be real. And if it's real, then I got something to lose again. She stared at him, her chest aching in ways that had nothing to do with cold. I already decided to stay, she said. I know, and I already feel like I'm part of this place. I see that. Then say it. He looked up and something in his face cracked, not his composure, but his armor. I want you here, Edna, not just for peace, not just for protection. I want you here because I sleep better knowing you're on the other side of the room. Because when I play the fiddle, I hope you're listening. And because when I think of what it means to survive this place, it don't make sense without you in it. Her hands trembled around the mug. She set it down and stood. Crossed the room. And without asking, without warning, she reached out and took his hand. It was rough, scarred, but it closed around hers like it had been waiting. Neither of them said anything else, because in that moment there was nothing left unsaid. Ezra left at noon. The storm had quieted, the light shifted. Before he mounted his horse, he looked between them and smiled, crooked and tired. Next time I ride up here, I'll expect to see a ring. Edna smirked. Then bring whiskey. Isaac didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either. And when Ezra rode off, Edna leaned into Isaac just a little, barely noticeable, but enough for the wolf dog to notice and come lay between them. That night, Edna opened the box. Inside was a single folded paper. Her breath caught when she saw the handwriting. It was hers. The letter she'd written months ago, but never mailed, addressed to no one, stamped with no town, just folded and forgotten in the bottom of her trunk back home. I don't want safety, it read. I want truth. I want someone who listens. I want a place where I can be loud or quiet and still be seen. She blinked back tears. Isaac watched her from across the room. How did you get this? She asked, voice breaking. Sister Madeline, he said simply. She found it when she visited your boarding house. Thought you meant to send it. Thought maybe it was the real reason. Edna covered her mouth. It was. You don't build a home by running from your past. You build it by making peace with it. The first green shoot broke through the snow on the morning Edna saw the dogwood bloom. It wasn't much, just a single bud near the creek, stubborn and pale, poking its head into the chill air, like it didn't care if winter had truly passed or not. But it was enough. Enough to stir something in her chest. enough to make her believe for the first time in weeks that maybe things could grow here. She knelt beside it, brushing away the slush with her bare hand. The ground was still cold, still heavy with frost, but life was pushing through anyway. Behind her, the cabin smoked steady. Isaac had gone to check snares. The wolf dog lay nearby, head on his paws, watching her like he understood the weight of the moment. She stood, pulled her shawl tight, and walked back up the trail toward home. Home. The word didn't taste foreign anymore. Inside, she stirred the ashes and made coffee, humming softly to herself, a habit she'd picked up from her mother, though she hadn't realized it until now. The tune wasn't anything in particular, just a thread of sound to warm the walls. By midday, Isaac returned with 2 rabbits and a quiet smile. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. They moved around each other like 2 sides of the same breath, him skinning her seasoning, him chopping her boiling. There was peace in the rhythm. A small life being built not in grand gestures, but in the daily choice to show up. But peace, as always, didn't last long. The knock came in the late afternoon. Not hurried, not angry, just unexpected. When Isaac opened the door, the man standing outside was large, soft around the edges, with a wide-brimmed hat and red cheeks that looked burned from too much liquor or too much sun. He tipped his hat politely. "Name's Franklin Bell," he said. "I'm looking for my niece." Edna froze at the sound of her name on someone else's lips. Edna May Sinclair. He continued, stepping inside without waiting for an invite. "My sister sent me all the way from Hot Springs. Thought maybe I'd find her out here shacked up with a savage." Isaac didn't move, didn't blink, but the room dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Edna stepped forward, voice low. "Uncle Frank." He turned to her, smile wide but empty. "There you are. Lord, you look half wild. What have they got you doing out here, living like some dirt-scraping hermit?" "I'm fine," she said. "You can go now." He blinked. "You think I came all this way to leave without you? Your mama's worried sick, said you ran off chasing some letter and wound up married to a ghost." "I'm not married," she said flatly. "But I'm not running either." Frank laughed, big and wet. "Honey, you don't get to rewrite your story just 'cause it don't suit you. You left everything, church, work, family. For this," he gestured around the cabin like it offended him. Isaac still hadn't moved, but his eyes were locked on Edna's face, waiting. Frank leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "You think this man cares for you, girl? Look at you. You've lost weight. You've gone plain. You ain't slept well in a month, I can see it in your eyes." Edna's hands clenched at her sides. "I sleep just fine," she said. "And I haven't been plain a day in my life." Frank's grin faltered. "Edna, no," she snapped. "You don't get to say my name like that. Like you know who I am. You didn't come here for me. You came here to fix the story you've been telling people about me. But I'm not broken." He scoffed. "So what, you're gonna stay? Live like this?" She looked around the room at the worn table, the patched windows, the smell of stew, and the sound of fire, and her heart settled. "Yes," she said, "because I'm not surviving anymore. I'm building something. Something like a home." Frank looked from her to Isaac, then back again. "You'll regret this," he said. Maybe she answered. "But I'll do it on my terms." He shook his head, turned, and stomped out, slamming the door behind him. They stood there in the silence that followed. Isaac finally spoke. "You want me to go after him?" "No," she said. "He's not worth the walk." She sat down, hands trembling slightly, though not from fear. Isaac moved to the hearth and poured her a mug of coffee. He didn't say anything, just set it beside her and sat across from her the way he always did. She looked at him. "You heard what he said?" Isaac nodded. "I heard." And he shrugged. "He doesn't know you." "I do." She smiled, tired but real. "He said I'd regret it," she whispered. Isaac's eyes softened. "Do you?" She shook her head. "Not for a second." That night she pulled out her embroidery and added something new to the cloth, a single blooming dogwood branch. Isaac watched her brow raised. "Spring," she said simply. "It's coming." He nodded. "About time." They sat together, the fire warm and steady. Outside, the snow had started to melt. Inside, something else was blooming. And Edna, for the first time, didn't feel like a visitor in her own life. A fire that burns this long doesn't go out. It just waits for more wind. The air carried the scent of pine pitch and something sharper smoke. Edna smelled it first. She was down near the creek gathering early spring roots when the breeze shifted and brought with it the unmistakable sting of burning wood. It wasn't the kind of fire you made to stay warm or cook supper. It was the kind of fire meant to send a message. She stood slowly squinting at the sky and saw the thin line of gray rising above the tree line. Not their cabin. Further east. Maybe 2 miles. She dropped the basket of roots and took off toward home. By the time she reached the cabin, Isaac had already seen it. He was on the porch, rifle in hand, the wolf dog alert at his side. "It's old man Delaney's barn," he said without her asking. "Or what's left of it." Edna's breath came quick. "Delaney. He's the one who tried to keep the peace last fall, right?" Isaac nodded. "Only rancher on the council who didn't vote for the land grab. You think they're sending a warning?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. An hour later, Hawk arrived on horseback, his face dark, his voice low. "They torched it last night. Left a white cross planted in the ash. Nobody was hurt." Delaney saw the smoke early and ran his stock out. "But it's the third in a week. Someone's escalating." Edna glanced at Isaac, then back to Hawk. "Why now?" Hawk sighed, wiping sweat from his brow despite the chill. "Because spring means movement. Trails clear. Guns travel easier. People want to know whose land this mountain belongs to." Isaac's jaw was tight. "And some of them want to make sure it doesn't belong to men like me." Hawk nodded. "I came to ask you to come down to the next council meet. Show your face, let them see you're not hiding. Edna, too. They need to see the two of you what you're building." Edna hesitated. "You think it'll matter?" "More than you know," Hawk said. "A fire that burns this long doesn't go out. It just waits for more wind. And right now, the wind's picking up." They rode into Florence 2 days later after a night of tense silence and quiet preparations. The trail was muddy, but the weather held. People stared. Some looked away quickly, pretending not to notice Isaac with his rifle slung across his back, Edna riding close behind. Her jaw set like stone. Others didn't bother hiding their stares. A few spat in the dirt when they passed. They ignored it. At the town hall, Hawk waited with Sister Madeline. The nun smiled when she saw Edna, but her eyes held worry. "You look stronger," she said softly. "I feel stronger," Edna replied. Inside the room was loud men talking over one another, smoke from pipes hanging thick in the air. The moment Isaac stepped in, everything went quiet. He didn't flinch, just walked to the front and stood tall. Hawk cleared his throat. We all know why we're here. Delaney's barn, the other fires, the whispers about violence this spring. One of the councilmen, a thin man with a pinched nose, stood. We don't need talk. We need protection. We've been too soft for too long. Another added. We let one man live up a mountain, and now others think they can claim our land too. Isaac stepped forward. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My mother was born on that mountain, before this town had a name, before your fences, your roads, your deeds. I didn't come here to take anything. I came because I was told there might be peace. The room murmured. He turned to Edna, and she came looking for something better, too. We built a life together. It's not much, but it's ours, and we won't run. Edna stepped up beside him. Her hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. You think we're the problem, that if we leave, things will settle down. But it's not about us. It's about fear, and what you do with it. She looked directly at the pinched-nose man. You don't fix fear by setting fires. You don't build peace by burning barns. A silence followed. Then Madeline stood. If this town means to survive, it has to decide what kind of people we are, who belongs here, and what we do with those who bring hate. It wasn't a vote, but it didn't need to be. Lines were drawn in the air that night, and everyone felt them. Outside, the moon was rising. Edna stood by the hitching post, the night wind wrapping her skirt around her legs. Isaac came up beside her. You didn't have to speak. I know, she said. But I did. He looked at her. You were braver than most men in that room. She gave him a tired smile. Brave doesn't mean I'm not scared. I know, he said. That's what makes it real. That night back in the cabin, Edna couldn't sleep. The wind outside was soft, but steady, like breath moving through trees. She sat by the window watching the stars. Isaac joined her, wrapping a blanket around them both. I keep thinking about the fire, she said. So do I. What if they come for us next? He didn't speak right away. Then we stand, like we did today, like we will tomorrow. She leaned into him. I used to run, she whispered, every time something scared me, every time someone made me feel small. Not anymore. No, she said, not anymore. There's a line a man crosses, and once he does, he don't get to come back the same. The sun was just breaking through the low clouds when Edna heard the first shot. She was outside hanging the morning wash on the line, fingers stiff from the chill. The sound cracked the air like lightning, too close, too sharp. The birds scattered. The wolf dog raised his head from the porch and growled low. A second shot rang out. Then silence. Then yelling. She dropped the sheet and ran toward the ridge. From the top of the hill, she saw them 3 men on horseback, circling the trap line near the western edge of the cabin's clearing. Isaac was down there, rifle slung across his back, but not raised. One of the men, broad, thick, beard-red flannel, had dismounted and was kicking one of Isaac's traps apart with the butt of his rifle. The other 2 jeered. I said this land's for white men, the bearded one barked. Not mutts and their whores. Isaac didn't move. Not yet. But Edna saw it, the tightness in his shoulders, the stillness in his hands. Then the bearded man spit in the snow at Isaac's feet and laughed. That's when Isaac moved, not with rage but with clarity. He stepped forward and struck the man hard across the face, not with his fists, but with the flat of his palm. Quick, deliberate, enough to knock him back a step. Then it all went to hell. The other two raised their rifles. Isaac ducked behind a fallen log as the first shot split the air. Edna screamed from the ridge, but no one heard her. She ran. By the time she reached them, the men had pulled back, likely spooked by the sound of her voice or the wolf dog sprinting down after her. Isaac stood over the bearded man, now rifle in his hands, muzzle pressed to the man's chest. The man's eyes were wide with something between fear and shame. "Go," Isaac said, voice low. "Now." The man scrambled up and mounted his horse, blood dripping from his nose. They didn't look back as they galloped into the trees. Edna reached Isaac and touched his arm. He flinched, then steadied. His hands were shaking. "You didn't shoot," she whispered. "I wanted to, but you didn't." He nodded once. "There's a line a man crosses, and once he does, he don't get to come back the same." She took his hand. It was cold, damp, but strong. "You didn't cross it. Not today." They spent the rest of the day silent. Isaac reset the traps. Edna finished the wash, though her hands trembled every time she touched the line. That night, Hawk came. He'd heard. Word traveled fast in these mountains, especially when guns were involved. "You did right," Hawk said, "but it won't stop here." Isaac sat near the fire, polishing the stock of his rifle. "I know. They'll spin it. Say you attacked. Say she's in danger. Say you're a savage after all." Edna stood behind Isaac. "Then we tell the truth louder." Hawk nodded slowly. "You might not have the luxury of talking anymore, Edna. You might have to choose who you're willing to bleed for." She didn't hesitate. "I already have." Isaac looked up at her. Something passed between them, not fragile, not romantic. Something older, deeper, a recognition of who they were becoming. The next morning, Sister Madeline arrived with a basket of dried herbs and 2 letters. She placed one in Edna's hands. "From your mother." The other she handed to Isaac. "From the governor's office." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "What does a man in Helena want with me?" Madeline exhaled. Word of what happened in Florence reached the capital. There are factions pushing for a crackdown on independent landholders. But there are others, those who see the value in someone like you. A man who won't burn down a town when provoked. Isaac opened the letter, read it slowly, and didn't speak for a long time. When he finally looked up, his voice was low. "They're offering a land patent. If I agree to serve as a liaison between settlers and native bands along the Bitterroot line." Edna's breath caught. "You mean they'd make it legal, your claim?" He nodded. "They want to use me to calm the fire. Give them a name they can show off as a bridge." "Is that what you want?" she asked. Isaac folded the letter. "I want the right to stand here and not be hunted for it." Madeline looked between them. "It's risky. You take their offer, they own a piece of you. But you say no, they'll find someone else to blame." He stood, walked to the window. The dogwood outside was in full bloom now, white petals catching the breeze. "I don't want to be a symbol," he said. "Then don't be," Edna replied. "Be a man. And make them reckon with that." That night, as the wind rolled down from the mountains and spring crept closer, Edna sat by the fire with Isaac beside her. He held the letter in one hand, her hand in the other. "We'll go," he said. To Helena, he nodded. "We'll speak our truth. Together." She rested her head on his shoulder. Outside, the fire hadn't burned, but it hadn't gone out either, and the wind was still rising. "Your blood doesn't make you less, and your name doesn't make you more. It's what you do with both that writes your story. The train to Helena was louder than Edna expected. It rattled like a freight of bones across the rails, shaking through the hills like it had somewhere urgent to be. She sat beside Isaac in a half-empty car wrapped in a shawl stitched by her own hand. The seats were cracked leather, the kind that squeaked with every breath. Opposite them sat a tired woman with a basket of bread and a boy too young to sit still. Edna stared out the window. Mountains gave way to fields, forests thinned into plains, and the sky turned wide as a mouth learning to speak. Isaac hadn't said much since they boarded. She glanced at him. His eyes weren't closed, but they weren't seeing the train either. They were somewhere else, deep in memory or deeper in dread. She reached for his hand. He didn't flinch, just held it tight. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. He didn't answer at first. "Then I've walked through fire, Edna. What scares me now is what I'll see in the mirror after." The Capitol building sat like a stone crown above Helena, cold and proud. Snow still clung to the corners, but the spring sun had started its slow war against the frost. Inside it smelled like polished wood, old paper, and the kind of silence that doesn't trust visitors. They were met by a man in a black suit with pale eyes and a politician's handshake. He didn't introduce himself, just ushered them into a paneled room with high ceilings and stiff-backed chairs. A handful of men sat waiting. One woman, all white. Edna felt the shift the moment Isaac entered. The air didn't just change, it recoiled. One of the men leaned in and whispered something to another. Isaac stood tall. The pale-eyed man cleared his throat. "Mr. Red Elk, I go by Isaac Lander," he said flatly. "My mother was Oglala. My father was a trapper named Matthew Lander. I use his name because it's the one that got written down first, not because it means more." A pause. Edna stood beside him, quiet but not silent. The pale-eyed man smiled thinly. "Mr. Lander, the territory is changing. You know this. As settlers expand, so do tensions. We believe someone like you, someone with roots in both camps, could help smooth that transition. Be a figure of peace." "You want a poster child," Isaac said. "A name to point to when they ask why the land's burning." The woman on the council, the only one who met Isaac's eyes, directly spoke. "We want peace. If that means giving one man a claim to quiet 20 others, so be it." Isaac nodded. "And if it means cutting me loose the minute it goes wrong?" Silence. Edna stepped forward. "What exactly do you want from him?" The pale-eyed man straightened. "We'd name him Territorial Liaison, a mediator between council members and the independent landholders along the Bitterroot. He'd be given legal title to his homestead. In exchange, he'd speak on behalf of both sides." Isaac crossed his arms. "And when neither side wants to listen, then you speak louder," the man said. Isaac exhaled, slow and measured. "Let me tell you what I've seen. My mother taught me to track before I could read. My father taught me to build traps and fix rifles. I've lived through winters most of you wouldn't last a week in. I've fought off men who looked like me and men who looked like you." He stepped closer to the long table. "My name is not a bridge. My blood is not a tool. But if you want someone who knows what peace costs and what it's worth, I'll serve." Edna's heart rose in her chest. The woman on the council nodded once. The pale-eyed man offered his hand. "Then welcome, Mr. Lander." Isaac didn't take it. He looked to Edna instead. And she saw him fully then, not just as the man who lived up the mountain, or the one who stood by her side in silence, but as someone stepping into a history bigger than either of them. They stayed that night in a boarding house on the edge of town. Clean linens, hot food, too much talking in the hallways. Isaac sat on the bed polishing his rifle with slow, steady hands. Edna folded clothes nearby. Her hands ached from tension. "You surprised them," she said. Isaac didn't look up. "They didn't expect me to speak at all." "No," she said. "But I think they listened." He finished the rifle, set it aside. "They think I'm half of something," he said quietly. "But I'm not. I'm whole. Just not in a way that fits their maps." She came over, sat beside him. "Your blood doesn't make you less," she said. "And your name doesn't make you more. It's what you do with both that writes your story." He looked at her, then kissed her forehead. In the morning they received a letter under the door. A wax seal, plain paper. It was official. The title to the homestead. Isaac stared at it a long while. He didn't open it. "I never thought I'd own land," he said. "You already did," Edna replied. "Now they're just admitting it." They left Helena under gray skies and a rising wind. Edna watched the city fade behind them brick by brick until all that was left were the ridges and the sky. Isaac didn't speak for the first hour. Then just as they crossed a river swollen with spring melt, he turned to her. "We're not done." "No," she said. "We're just beginning." He smiled. It was a rare thing. And it stayed on his face as they rode back toward the mountain. The valley was blooming by the time they returned. Pine gave way to aspen. Snow retreated into shadows and creek beds, revealing wildflowers beneath the kind that didn't ask permission to bloom. The cabin stood unchanged, but Edna noticed the shift the moment they stepped onto the porch. The silence was different. Not empty, not threatening. Expectant, like the mountain had been waiting for them. Isaac unsaddled the horses while Edna opened the door. The cabin still smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs, but there was something else, a note left on the table, weighted down with a stone. She unfolded it with steady hands. "You think you've won something, but it ain't over. Some of us remember who this land belongs to, and we don't forget." There was no name. There didn't have to be. She read it twice, then burned it in the hearth without a word. 3 nights later, the fire came. It started near the shed, dry kindling stacked for the season, set ablaze just before dawn. The wind carried sparks to the edge of the roof, but the snowmelt kept the ground wet enough to hold the flames back. Isaac was already outside, throwing water, stamping the edge of the shed with his boots. Edna hauled buckets from the barrel and passed them forward. The wolf dog barked once, low and sharp, then bolted into the trees, chasing scent or threat. They fought it back by first light. By then, the shed was half gone, but the cabin still stood. Smoke curled into the sky like a warning flag. Isaac stood with his hands on his knees, breathing hard. "This wasn't a message," he said. "This was the start of something." Edna didn't speak. She looked at the trees, at the place the dog had disappeared at the horizon. "We end it now," she said. They didn't ride into Florence. They didn't wait for letters or meetings or men in black coats to give them permission. They went to the source. Eli Marrow lived near the ridge. Big house, bigger voice. He'd been one of the loudest names on the land dispute, one of the first to accuse Isaac last winter. When they arrived, Eli stood on the porch like he'd expected them. "I see smoke didn't scare you off." "No," Isaac said, "but you're gonna wish it had." Eli smirked. "What you come to threaten me in broad daylight, with the woman you stole at your side?" Edna stepped forward. I came to remind you who I am. He looked at her puzzled. I'm the woman who buried her past out here, who earned her peace with blood and sweat, who stood in your council chamber and spoke when every man in that room looked the other way. Isaac added, and I'm the man who gave everything for land that was his to begin with. I've spilled enough blood to know when to stop. Eli folded his arms. You got law now, sure, but laws change. Isaac nodded. So do people. He stepped closer. You light another fire. You hurt another neighbor. And it won't be a council that answers. It'll be me. And I won't bring words. Eli's smirk faded. I ain't afraid of you. You should be, Edna said. They left before he could respond. Sometimes a fire doesn't need to burn to leave heat behind. That night the wolf dog returned, limping but alive. Edna cleaned the wound, whispered thanks. The wind shifted, and for the first time in weeks she let herself breathe. Isaac sat beside her by the fire, watching the flames. Do you think it's over? She asked. He shook his head. No, but I think it's turning. A week later, neighbors came. Delaney brought lumber for the shed. Sister Madeline brought seeds and a jar of blackberry preserves. Ezra came with tools and stayed the night. They didn't say much about the fire, but they said everything in what they carried. The land had spoken, and some had finally listened. In the weeks that followed, Edna planted a garden, rows of carrots, beans, a patch of herbs near the window. She found a rhythm again, not the old rhythm of survival, but something gentler. A life not built around what could go wrong, but what might grow. Isaac hunted less, played the fiddle more. Sometimes Edna sang, not loudly, just enough to fill the cracks. And when the dogwood bloomed again, white and full, they stood beneath it shoulder to shoulder and didn't say a word, because they didn't need to. On the first day of summer, Isaac brought her a box, rough-carved, simple. The lid didn't fit quite right, but the hinges held. Inside was the gold ring she'd once imagined, and beside it, a folded note. You were never a gift I deserved, but loving you made me worthy of one. She cried, but only a little. Then she put the ring on herself, and they danced in the clearing, while the fiddle sang alone. Years passed, not easy years, but real ones, the kind you measure in seasons, not scars. People still whispered, but fewer now. Children were born in Florence who didn't know Isaac as the half-breed trapper. They knew him as the man who played music at the winter socials, who fixed fences without charging a dime, who once helped pull a cart from the mud in a thunderstorm. Edna became more than a stranger. She became someone whose bread was passed around at town meetings, whose name was spoken with a kind of respect no paper title ever gave. They never had children of their own. But they raised things. Tomatoes, chickens, a dog with 3 legs. And sometimes when the wind was just right, the howl of something wild echoed through the hills, and it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a hymn. On the day Isaac died, he was sitting on the porch carving a wooden horse for no one in particular. Edna found him with his head tilted back, his face soft, the air still. She didn't cry then, not until she opened the drawer and found another box. Inside was a note. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But don't sit in silence. Don't fold into grief. The gift was never the box, Edna. It was the hands that built it with you. She held it to her chest and wept. Not for what she lost, but for everything she'd found. The cabin still stands. The garden grows wild now, but the dogwood still blooms each spring, white as snow, steady as memory. and if you stand quiet long enough, you might hear it. The music of a fiddle on the wind, and the whisper of a woman who once crossed a country not to be saved, but to build something worth saving. Because in the end, the land didn't change because someone claimed it. It changed because two people chose to belong to it. Together.